Ladies and gentlemen, a classic Japanese high school hallway, but the air doesn't hum with chatter about club activities or weekend plans. Instead, it crackles with the end of a life. Our protagonist, Asa Mitaka, lies dying, a victim of a classmate's monstrous justice. This is her closing panel, until it isn't. In the silence of death, a bargain is struck. Her body, her broken life, becomes a shared apartment. Her new roommate, Yoru, the war devil, a being of pure, violent instinct who can't tell a social cue from a sword. And just like that, Asa is shoved back into the world, a timid, overthinking student now sharing her head with the embodiment of conflict itself. Her new existence is a desperate, clashing internal monologue, a battle for control in a world she never asked to be part of again. Let us turn the page to a story that begins not with destiny, but with disaster, a story not of a chosen one, but of a girl chosen by tragedy. We meet Asa Mitaka in a state of supreme, self-imposed isolation, a student at 4th East High School whose entire existence is a meticulously crafted fortress against the pain of connection. To understand Asa is to understand the crushing weight of guilt that predates any devil's contract. Her worldview, a philosophy of cynical solitude, was forged in the fires of profound loss. Her father was taken by a devil, a nameless terror that stole her childhood's foundation. This primal wound was then salted by a sacrifice of unbearable love, her mother, who gave her own life to save Asa and a beloved pet cat from the same monstrous fate, embedding in Asa's soul a debt she could never repay and a love that now only existed as a ghost. And then, the final, cruel twist of the knife, that very cat, her last living tether to her mother's love, was callously killed by an adult next door, an act of petty jealousy that taught Asa a terrible lesson, that trust and vulnerability are not just weaknesses, but fatal flaws. So, she built walls. She viewed her cheerful, gossiping classmates not with envy, but with a simmering, intellectual disdain, convincing herself she was superior in her loneliness, that avoiding all social missteps was the only way to avoid further catastrophe. Her life was a script written in fear, a performance where the only winning move was not to play. Yet, this fragile fortress of the mind was brutally, physically shattered in a single, shocking moment of grotesque violence. A classmate, Yuko, having made a contract with the Justice Devil in a twisted quest for righteous power, saw in the isolated, different, Asa a symbol of all that was wrong. In a hallway that should have been safe, Asa was targeted, attacked, and brutally killed, her body broken, her carefully constructed world ending not with a whimper, but with the tearing of flesh and the crushing of bone. This was the definitive end of Asa Mitaka. But in the silent, infinite blackness that followed, a voice cut through the void. It was not an angel of mercy, but a devil of desperation. Yoru, the war devil, a primordial entity stripped of her power and form, found in Asa's fresh, vacant corpse a perfect vessel. A deal was offered in the absence of any other option, a life for a life, a body for a purpose. With no consciousness left to consent, Asa's physical form was reanimated, her heart forced to beat again, her lungs to draw air, not by her own will, but by the invading will of war. Thus, Asa Mitaka lived a second time, but this was no resurrection. It was a hostile takeover. She awoke not to salvation, but to a shared prison of her own flesh. Her mind was now a cacophonous room with two tenants, her own, terrified, grieving human consciousness, and Yoru's single-minded, brutal, and socially obtuse warlord instincts. Yoru saw the world only as battlefields and weapons. Asa saw it as a minefield of social anxiety and past trauma. Their partnership was born from absolute coercion, a constant, clashing internal monologue where the simple act of walking down the street became a battle of agendas, Asa worrying about how to appear normal, Yoru assessing every passerby and object for its potential as a lethal instrument. This, then, is the profound tragedy and bizarre premise of her second life. Asa Mitaka, the girl who mastered loneliness, now can never be alone. She is forever tethered to the most violent, incompatible roommate imaginable, forced to navigate a world that already broke her once, now while wrestling a devil for control of her own soul. Her story is the journey from being a victim of fate to becoming a prisoner of war, the war within. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer psychological dissonance of having your own mind become a shared apartment, with a hostile, supernatural entity who didn't even bother to sign a lease. This is the daily, suffocating reality for Asa Mitaka after her forced resurrection. Her new existence is not a second chance at life, but a life sentence of a shared sentence. The concept of privacy, of a singular self, evaporates completely. Her consciousness is no longer a sanctuary but a contested war room. The other tenant is Yoru, the war devil, a being of such pure, undistilled militant instinct that she views the complex tapestry of human society, its friendships, its anxieties, its unspoken rules, as irrelevant background noise to the primary objective, conflict. Where Asa experiences a crippling wave of social anxiety over a misordered greeting, Yoru experiences only tactical impatience. Where Asa holds a sentimental attachment to a memory of her mother, Yoru sees only a useless distraction from their mission to forge weapons and regain lost power. Their communication is not a dialogue but a collision of alien wavelengths. Yoru's voice is a constant, grating presence in Asa's mental ear, issuing commands with the blunt force of a general, utterly baffled by Asa's weak, human emotions like fear, guilt, or the desire for a normal school life. She cannot comprehend why Asa would hesitate to turn a cherished classmate's belonging into a spear, or why the social fallout matters more than the tactical advantage. For Asa, every waking moment is a desperate act of performative normalcy, a high-wire act where one misstep, a facial expression controlled by Yoru, a vocal outburst she didn't authorize, could expose her as a monster. She must constantly negotiate, argue, and sometimes outright battle for control over her own limbs, her own voice, in a silent, internal civil war that leaves her perpetually exhausted. The profound tragedy is that Asa, who built her entire identity on the principle of solitude to avoid pain, is now condemned to the ultimate intimacy with the one being most guaranteed to cause it. Yoru is not just a power, she is an invasive consciousness that reframes every thought, every interaction, through a lens of violence. Theirs is a partnership forged not in mutual need, but in mutual captivity. Asa is trapped in a life she didn't ask for, and Yoru is trapped in a vessel too, human, and emotional, for her purposes. It is a claustrophobic bond of resentment and reluctant coexistence, where the battlefield is not a city block, but the very psyche of a grieving, frightened girl. Let us now dissect the core of her newfound, cursed power, a power that perfectly mirrors the twisted contradictions of her existence. Following her fusion with Yoru, Asa gained a devilish ability that is less a supernatural gift and more a metaphysical torture device, the power to transform any object into a devastating weapon, but only through the alchemy of profound personal guilt. This, guilt equals power, paradox is the brutal engine of her capabilities. It is not the object's monetary value, its rarity, or even its physical properties that determine the resulting weapon's strength, it is the sheer, crushing weight of the remorse Asa feels for having sacrificed it. A cheap, mass-produced uniform becomes a blade of immense power if she feels she has betrayed the institution it represents. A simple, shared meal can morph into a cataclysmic hammer if she believes she has irreparably damaged the friendship it symbolized. The power weapon eases her conscience, turning her deepest vulnerabilities, her empathy, her capacity for regret, her lingering sense of responsibility for all the tragedies in her life, into the very fuel for destruction. This creates a horrifying internal economy where to grow stronger, to survive the next battle Yoru demands she fight, Asa must first emotionally devastate herself. She must consciously make a choice that she knows will haunt her, that will carve another scar onto her already wounded soul. Every powerful weapon she forges is therefore a monument to a personal failure, a relationship broken, or a moral line crossed. It forces her to constantly evaluate her attachments and then systematically destroy them for utility. The power ruthlessly punishes sentimentality while simultaneously demanding it as a resource. It traps her in a cycle where protecting others, a core, if buried, desire born from her mother's sacrifice, often requires her to first harm the connections she seeks to preserve. This makes her not a heroic warrior who draws strength from courage or justice, but a tragic artisan whose might is directly proportional to her own self-flagellation. In a cruel irony, the very guilt that once paralyzed her, the guilt over her mother's death, her cat's demise, her own social failures, is now the only thing of value she truly possesses. Yoru, who views emotions as pointless human noise, is forced to rely entirely on this messy, painful, and illogical human feeling to achieve her goals of conquest. Thus, Asa's path is paved with a terrible calculus. To move forward, she must constantly look back at what she has willingly broken, making her journey one of accumulating not just power, but an ever heavier burden of remorse. This brings us to the tumultuous, redemptive arc of her journey, the transformation from a passive victim of circumstance into an active, albeit desperate, agent of her own chaotic destiny. The path from victim to vigilante for Asa Mitaka is not a straight, heroic ascent, it is a jagged, stumbling, and often reluctant climb out of the abyss, driven by two converging and conflicting desires. The first is Yoru's singular, destructive obsession, to reclaim her lost power and status as the feared war devil by any means necessary, using Asa's body and guilt-forged weapons as her tools. The second, far more fragile and human, is Asa's own yearning, for connection, for a redemption she feels she doesn't deserve, and for a love that can anchor her in the storm of her existence. This yearning finds a poignant focus in Denji, the Chainsaw Man, a fellow devil-human hybrid whose bizarre, unflinching authenticity presents an alien yet magnetic alternative to her own tortured life. Her pursuit of him begins as a mission for Yoru, a tactical ploy to get close to the ultimate weapon, but it gradually, agonizingly, morphs into Asa's own genuine, clumsy quest for companionship. This duality defines her vigilantism. Every action is a tense negotiation between Yoru's mandate for violent, strategic gain and Asa's fragile, emerging impulse to protect and connect. She is not a classic hero who fights for justice or the greater good, she is a girl fighting for a sliver of personal meaning and a chance to atone for a past she cannot change. Her battles are therefore deeply personal and emotionally catastrophic. She fights not against abstract evil, but against devils that represent her own traumas, like the Justice Devil that originally killed her, and in defense of the fragile, new bonds she has formed, however awkwardly, with people like her club president Yoshida or the enigmatic Denji. Each confrontation forces her to wield her guilt-powered arsenal, meaning every victory is psychologically Pyrrhic, paid for with another piece of her own peace. Yet, in this painful process, a purpose is forged in the fire. The timid, self-loathing girl who wanted only to avoid error begins to make conscious, world-altering choices. She chooses to fight, to sacrifice, and to care, even when it hurts. She begins to direct Yoru's power, however imperfectly, toward ends she herself defines, saving a cat, protecting a classmate, pursuing a date that has nothing to do with war. This is her vigilante genesis, not born from a desire for vengeance, but from a desperate, clawing need to find a reason to live within the ruined life she was given, to prove that the girl named Asa Mitaka is more than just a vessel for war, but a person capable of love and worthy of a future. Her story becomes one of forging an identity from the shrapnel of her old self in the invasive presence of a devil, a journey toward becoming someone who, despite everything, can still say, "I want to live."